The Oxford English Dictionary defines poet as a writer of verse distinguished by particular insight and remarkable powers of imagination, creativity, and expression. With this in mind, I say Natasha Saje is most definitely a poet. It is evident in her writing that she is a true lover of words and languages. Her most recent book of poems, Vivarium, elevates the alphabet unlike any alphabet book you've ever read. Dean Young called her writing resourceful, restless, witty, and substantially intelligent, and I have to agree. Each of her poems is fresh and full of life. Her work shows boundless dexterity, both in form and theme, making her a delight to read. Saje was born in Germany and moved to New York as a young girl with her family. She attended college at the University of Virginia, got her MA at Johns Hopkins University, and received a PhD at the University of Maryland. Her first book of poems, Read Under the Skin, was published in 1994 and was awarded the Agnes Lynch Starrett Prize, as well as the Townsend State Prize in Literature. She has published 2 other collections of poems, Bend and Vivarium. Her most recent publication is a book of critical essays about poetry, entitled Windows and Doors, A Poet Reads Literary Theory. Her work has appeared in many periodicals, including the Kenyon Review, the Paris Review, Plowshares, and the New York Times. Saje teaches at the Vermont College of Fine Arts MFA program, and she is a professor at Westminster College in Salt Lake City. We're very fortunate to have her here. Please welcome Natasha Saje.
Thank you, Cicely. Can you hear me when the mic is that far away? Yes? A little lower, maybe? A little lower? Yeah? How about this? That's better. I think I can tell. And thank you to the English department and Michael and Cicely and all of you for coming. It's a real pleasure to be here. So as Cicely said, this is an abecedarium, which is an old form to use the alphabet as a structure. So the poems are organized in alphabetical order, and a lot of the poems are inspired by letters of the alphabet. So I will start, I'll tell you a little bit about my process for some of the poems. I love reading the dictionary, I always have. And I periodically still go through and make a list of words I don't know, or that intrigue me, that I'm not sure of. And I'm really interested in etymology, where words come from, because that shows us their history and also the history of the culture that produced them. So I have this list of words that I'm not sure of, and then I do more research about them and how they've changed. I use the Oxford English Dictionary a lot. And then I see, it's almost like iron filings and a magnet. I see what they have in common, or like a Ouija board. I see what is it about me and what I'm obsessed with and thinking about that these words can illuminate for me. And sometimes it's a story from my past, sometimes it's something I've read. So I think you'll see some of the patterns. So I'll start with one that was a story from my past poem. And it's all the words start with E. So I now have to take my glasses off, sorry. Essay, to try, from exagiare, to weigh out, examine. I was 11 and watching the galloping gourmet with his British Australian accent and his glass of wine, learning how to get juice out of a lemon by rolling it hard on the counter, when the doorbell rang. My hair around cans to make it straight. The man next door, his receding hair combed back. Armenia, the weasel whose fur turns from brown to white in winter. Asked if anyone else were home. I said no. Edentate, lacking teeth. Asked if he could come in. Electric, from Greek, electron, amber, because it produces sparks when rubbed. I said, no, I'm sorry. Euphemism, to speak with good words. We stood eye to eye. Eutrophic, a body of water with so much mineral organic matter, the oxygen is reduced. Until I slowly shut the door in his face. Eve from Hebrew, living, pushing with both hands. So this poem comes from a different obsession, and it's a letter to the fisher cat. We don't have any of those here, but it's a kind of weasel. The poem will go into more detail about what kind of weasel it is. The Latin name for it is Martis penante. And that Armenia, I mentioned in the last poem, also a weasel. I actually saw one in my backyard. Have any of you seen one around here? It's a mountain animal, and I saw it because I was looking at we live against the mountains, and there was a stone wall there, and I saw this streak of white moving along the stone wall, and I knew it wasn't a squirrel, and then I looked, and it was a weasel. But this one is bigger. So, dear fisher cat, never seen you in the flesh. I've seen a cousin, Martis, stuffed, in a shop window in Bavaria where they chew wiring in cars, and Martis Zibellina turned into a coat, thicker than mink, the price of a house. I tried it on with awe. I watched Martis Fiona on YouTube, the woman holding the camera cooing while the small, shy animal nosed around her terrace in the English countryside. Your name in Croatian, kuna, is currency. 7 million years old, much older than Homo and certainly sapiens. Trapped to the brink of extinction, you came back. You are to the others as the javelina is to the wild boar, a new world clade. Neither fisher nor cat. Some people love bears or whales or whooping cranes. I love you. Your sweet round ears and button nose, your fur heavy as the robe of a queen, your claws unsheathed in paws the size of a child's hand. You could be a toy, a cartoon, a pet, if it weren't for your carnivorous drive, your solitary soul. Your jaws can kill a porcupine, attacking snout first from below, eating it inside out. You cross the narrowest gap in the forest opening. You sleep in the crook of the beach in old-growth canopy. I'll see you someday, close range. I'll be the rabbit curled in the corner of the parsley garden, and you'll be there, unnoticed until too late, to swallow all the sounds my gullet makes. The letter H has an extraordinary number of compound words, and you'll hear a lot of them in this poem. Oh, how we hanky-panky harum-scarum in our happy home, dancing hoochie-coochie. Sure, it makes for hugger-mugger, but we give a hoop for happenstance. The yard is full of hound and hares, the door adorned with harlequins, in the closets hand-me-downs. If Hammurabi and his queen come by, we won't be hoity-toity, we'll offer haggis or humble pie. Our bed floats on hocus pocus, our corpore holy habeas, and the kitchen hums a hymn, hail to higgledy-piggledy. If the world can't call our hurly-burly hunky-dory, let it hara-kiri if it dares. And this poem makes a reference to something that Freud talked about. The Fort da. Fort means go, and da means here in German. And when a child plays that game with the mother or father going behind an obstruction, at a certain age, they don't realize what's happening, that the parent has actually, that the parent is still there but just not visible. I guess that's, yeah. Now I can read it this way. So this one's titled Happy and Sad, and it's also based on neurological research that I'll tell you about after. Happy and sad come different ways through the brain. In one, a feather is lofted on warm currents. In the other, lead talons drag you around a volcano's rim. One's a beach resort with sparkling pools and attentive staff. The other's a town in the interior. Hordes scratching dirt with rakes. That one's a deck of marked cards. The other a blank book of creamy pages. Back and forth between windows, fort da, the fear of losing or the freedom of knowing love remains. Two spigots. One, Chateau d'Yquem, the other, piss, the brain a bartender trying to regulate alternating or even sometimes simultaneous spurts. You never know what will fill your mouth. So the neurological research that Antonio Damasio and his team at the University of Iowa discovered maybe 30 years ago is that the happiness and sadness parts of the brain are in different parts. So that's why we need poetry to explain these bittersweet mixed feelings that we have all the time. The brain is stimulated by something from the happy side and the sad side at the same time. I was lucky enough to do a Fulbright in Slovenia in 2005, and that is my name is Slovenian. It means soot in Slovenian. My father surmised that somebody back then was a chimney sweep, and people got their names often from their occupations. So this poem is called Alibi, and it was written in response to when I got back, everyone said, "What did you do on your Fulbright?" Yeah, I taught a couple classes, but also I was treading on yellow primroses in their limestone beds. I was eating langoustine and saffron fettuccine with my fingers. I was learning not to smile at strangers. I was jaywalking. I was hanging out the window waiting for lightning to strike. I was having tooth number 12 drilled to death. I was up to my elbows in buckwheat. I was charmed. I was pumicing my heels. I was apologizing for my government. I was lost in reverie. I was listening to the sunset. I was mispronouncing the names of my cousins. I was shown the old slaughterhouse by some cats. I was practicing being blind, cobblestones under my soles. I was buying poisons whose labels I couldn't read. I was massaging my thumbs. I was drinking liqueur made from the dead poet's family recipe. I was using the clock tower of St. Joseph's to tell time. I was allowing boiled dough to rise in my stomach. I was making a list of famous syphilitics. I was comparing egg yolks to pumpkins. I was thinking about Flaubert putting in commas, then taking them out. I was planning the next time I could travel here and wrap solitude around me like cashmere. So this next poem is titled Milk River, and it takes place in the 18th century in Jamaica, and Milk River is the name of a spa, a resort town in Jamaica. And the poem's composed of two different kinds of discourse. One is the story of something that happened at Milk River, and the other is verbatim text taken from Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Women. I hope you'll figure out which is which. So Jamaica, 1775. He'd stolen some cakes. What can be expected of thee when the beings on whom thou depend for reason and support have all interest in deceiving thee? Been lashed so badly he looked like a skinned goat. The whole science of wantonness a more powerful stimulus than appetite was thrown into the dungeon. Errors are useful, usually to remedy other errors. Escaped. A man, when he undertakes a journey, in general, has the end in view. Ran into the hills. Living green on which the eye may look with complacency. Came upon a stream of warm, salty, bubbling water and bathed his wounded body. Beings who can govern themselves have nothing to fear in life. Return to the plantation. The strong wind of authority pushes subalterns forward. They scarcely know how or why. Mr. Ludford could not believe his eyes. Nature in everything demands respect, and those who violate her laws seldom violate them with impunity. The wounds had healed. He who loves not his brother, whom he has seen, how can he love God? Asked to see the stream in exchange for mercy. Monsters, who scarcely have shown any discernment of human excellence, have tyrannized their fellow creatures. Fenced in the area and put the slave there as a watchman. By cultivation, the heart as well as the understanding open. And I'll read a companion poem called Notes on Milk River about when I and my husband visited this place. Gosh, sorry. We imagine painted cottages open to the breeze, under these trees dripping with mangoes, on soil so rich every seed can grow. In a sensible country, this mineral spring, 50 times more active, more healing than Vichy, would be, as they say, developed. We look at each other and shake our heads. It wouldn't take much, but then again it would. In this country that won't tax the rich and can't tax the poor, a country without street signs, without. It's either tourists here or Jamaicans, with gates and guards or without. The road still washed out from the last hurricane, the long bay morass closed in by mountains and made up of mangroves. The beach littered with plastic, dogs and squatters in their shacks of aluminum and scrap built room by added room. No need for heat, a bathroom, or running water. We shake our heads. We're dreaming and already hopeless. Your night sweats again, and my mind racing ahead without you. The courtly waiter is so used to being alone, he changes radio channels at will. The only other guests, a family from the U.S., the mother Jamaican-born, drinking cokes. The wood floor tilts like the building as we sit on sturdy, oilcloth-covered mahogany chairs. The food's not bad, a local woman steaming shrimp and stewing goat. I fight the urge to wish for stronger herbs, heavier spoons. Milk River's got a history of ghosts, including you and me, our visit haunted by knowing without admitting, not even this water can cure you. A few miles away, in a different river, manatees undulate along what's left of seagrass, their numbers fewer each year, their moans a cross between bird and cat, their huge shapes tremulous in murky water. For a while, I had an eBay shopping obsession. That has passed, but this poem was written in the heat of that. And it's called Ode to eBay. Oh world, click, click. A Kerman rug, circa 75, cherry, teal, olive, cream, cigarette burns. A Sturgis, metal that looks old, vanity light, $9.95. The very shoes, brand new, Joseph Seibel, size 39, Electra model, that I walk in. At my fingers, 24 hours, 1,000 auctions ending as I write this, and one of them might be for something else I need or truly want and can afford. Romance of the Sea for 12, oyster forks, tomato servers, and cream soup spoons. I thought for days about the menus to make use of every implement, but finally let them go. There'll be more, I said, and sure enough, today there were. All losses are restored and sorrows end. I've studied original oil paintings, 12,371 listings, Scottish fold kittens, art, right, 2, and sandpaper, 71, and was pleased not to see my new purse, Clio and Patek. Oh, fellow buyers in our codes, seeing what we bought and when we paid, welcome, ABC Poet, eBay whispers when I boot up, just for you. Rugs to layer 3 feet thick, Jackie Kennedy's diamond, or a vintage mohair dachshund Waldy like the one I gave away, ready to pick things up where you left off? Now I see, schlepping was the problem in the past. It's shopping, pure, I love, more edifying than TV. I know what things are worth. eBay knows I know and watches me. For whom does FedEx roll? It rolls for me. In the interim I've been allotted, I wallow in a ghastly gift, a click against the clock. Is that what it's about? Or substitution? Plain and simple, stuff for what I lack. The ghastly gift reference, Betty Friedan in Feminine Mystique says that women have the ghastly gift of shopping, and indeed that is true. Women buy more than 70% of everything that is purchased in the United States. I'll read a poem, another letter poem. It's titled V, and you'll hear all the V words, I think. And then there's one. There are a lot of allusions to V things that aren't actually spelled out. So veritas. Not behind the veil of sky, but as the moving veil itself. Fox and its ears hanging upside down, virus carried, say, by civet cats from animal to human and back in the form of vaccines. Van Dyck moved from Belgium to England, to Italy, to England, bearing some melancholy elegance intact. His royal subject later deposed by the very principle that permits a husband to divorce a wife, permits a country to divorce its rulers, beheading merely a cruel flourish. Milton's vade mecums were faith and verse, from vertere to turn, 2 fingers spread as a sign or digits severed at the joints. Any search for abiding truth doomed, as a beautiful city built on water, viewed through the windows on the way to the dungeon. Maybe let's see. I'll read 2 more poems. And I'll read one, even though you don't have the pictures. I think I will read R, because it kind of goes with that. So it's a rebus. it has drawings. A rebus is where drawings substitute for some of the words. I'm kind of obsessed with the 18th century and the era of thinking about rights and responsibilities. And again, Wollstonecraft, Mary Wollstonecraft will appear in this poem. So I'm trying to think if there are any other references. Oh yeah, you might not know that in the 18th century it was very common to refer to certain men as rakes. Any of you heard of that? Yeah, okay. And those particular men were, they dealt women a bad deal. They used them and abused them and then got away scot-free, mostly. And we don't use that term anymore. Anyway. If you think a river is not an abstraction, ask a fish. Or a raccoon, racoonem. He scratches with his hands. Such clear habits. Raccoons don't switch philosophies midstream, like a rake who promises a woman a ring and then leaves. No such thing as a reformed rake, went the saying, because a man is what he does or doesn't do. Renounce debauchery, regret religion, beg for his life. And religion is not, said Thomas Paine, revelation or the word of God, but a human invention set up to terrify and enslave. In the reign of terror, thousands were guillotined, 200,000 arrested, including Paine, whose rights of man supported revolution, but whose reason proved too revolutionary even for Robespierre. Did he have an inkling of his own demise, that Republican who slept with a copy of Rousseau's Social Contract and who said, "Terror is nothing other than justice, prompt, severe, inflexible"? This at a time when a woman was property whose life expectancy was that of a zoo-kept rattlesnake, and whose words might as well have been rocks. Rational creatures, said Wollstonecraft, eschew soft phrases, susceptibility of heart, delicacy of sentiment, and refinement of taste. Restive creatures lose their heads or die in childbirth. Reading history, I shall be employed about things, not words, is like deciphering a letter written in runes. And I'll read one more poem. Sometimes I use an anagram generator for all kinds of things, just to generate more words, to get myself out of my brain. Do you know what those are? They're online. It's very easy now that everything's online. Just Google anagram generator and you will find one. And then the first thing you probably might want to do is put your name in and see what anagrams can be spit out from just your name. So I wrote this poem with the title of Pollution Curse. And I thought that's a terrible title. That's like it's like a freshman composition title. So, and I couldn't think of another title, so I put it in the anagram generator, and I came up with Sluice Pool Turn. And it's a sestina. What kind of wings would let us soar through glue? Too bad we're stuck on Earth, discovering cells soaked in nitrogen, in rains runoff burning from copper mines, or oil burning seabirds' beaks and wings. We don't demand companies rein in messes even as they screw us over with what they sell. Toxins everywhere. Who on earth knew? Pliny did, that unearthed asbestos, plus what we burn, flush, and dump, not to mention cell phones, would shadow us, wings of a bird of prey. We're the mice, glued and trapped by our precipitates. So much for drinking rain or growing carrots in soil full of lead. The nasty stew makes quite a meal. It burns our nostrils and our eyes, swings the scales of health. For sale, natural killer T cells that fight, or not, against the reign of Mercury, the one with wings, in air, in water, and on earth. Heads ache before they roll, burnished by an intravenous goo, administered by cheerful crews to curb abnormal growth of cells, along with radiation burn, surgery, and pills. Healing pain, we hope. Living on a ruined earth, we walk to cure. Winged horses burned into glue, and the earth sold short in our reign, with neither wing nor prayer. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Yes, back there.
So you talked about your love of reading the dictionary and of collecting words to kind of based on those words, and also your anagram generator. What other, I mean, these are really interesting methods for coming up with ideas. What other, are there other methods that you have that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I love looking at old books and reading old books. I was just reading a translation of a 1555 cookbook. It was translated from French, and I can read French, but it was really helpful to have the translation. It had an introduction, and it was the most excellent book of cookery. That's what it was called. And just the stuff I didn't know. I did not know how people ate in 1555 in France, and what they ate and what they did, and I should have known, but I didn't know about medlars. Do you know that fruit? It's a fruit. Chaucer writes about medlars. It's a fruit that you can only eat once it's rotten, and they never sell them, so you have to have a medlar tree. It's kind of like, I've never had one. Now I'm eager to taste one. So it's kind of like a quince, I think. And you have to wait until it's brown and soft in the middle. And then it's apparently really, really delicious. And you can make puddings with it and mousses and all kinds of things. Anyway, it made me realize that I'd never had a medlar, and I started writing. I started taking pieces of this cookery book and interspersing them with stuff that I looked up. And it's at the stage where I don't know it'll be a poem yet. It's just a found thing now. And now that the challenge is how to make it mean something other or more than just some pieces of writing, interesting writing. So that poem that I read that was taken from the Jamaican Story and Mary Wollstonecraft, so that it took a long time. The story was interesting on its own, but then the challenge was seeing the relationship between race and gender in oppression, and figuring out which parts of vindication of the rights of women to use for the Jamaican Story. So the hard work is still ahead of me, but the fun work was reading that book. And there was one recipe that said, take plantain, take comfrey, take some other things, and make a bomb and put your hands in it. And then it said, now you may put your hands in boiling water. So apparently, maybe it was greasy or something, and it prevented people from getting burned. But so reading is my main source of poems. And then the connection between what I'm obsessed with in my life and what matters to me, because you can't just have the one. It also has to have, I think the reason I read, maybe the reason you read poems, is you want to know the person who's behind them, right? So I have to make myself vulnerable and figure out what my stake is in finding these words and putting them together. And it has to teach me something as well. It has to be a discovery for me. So, as well as all the forms, I try to invent new forms. Those are also fun. But I think reading is the primary inspiration. And I saw another hand up along this. Yes.
What's your writing process? Do you just write a poem all at once or little by little over time?
Well, I take notes and I write by hand, and recent studies have supported that writing by hand is actually a really good thing to do in the initial stages of your writing process. Because, again, it uses different parts of your brain than a keyboard. So I write notes by hand, and I look stuff up, and almost never does a poem come out complete. I remember one in my second book that was easy, and it was from a dream. So it was like all I had to do was transcribe the dream, and realize then what it meant, and there it was. But that was a gift, that hasn't come again. So some of them take a long time. I try not to repeat myself, so I get that. I have a poem in each of my 3 books that is, in a way, a repetition. I call it the traveling with a friend poem, or friend in a restaurant poem. And each one is a little different, which is how I got away with letting myself produce the 3rd one. But I don't think there'll be a 4th one. Any other questions? Yes.
Did you try any recipes from this cookbook?
Not yet. I just read it like 2 nights ago. But I might. They were sophisticated. That's something we don't often think about. People long ago, they didn't have technology. They didn't have a lot of the things we have, but they were just as smart and just as sophisticated as we were. So there were a lot of beaten egg whites, which is something I still do. I can't wait to get a hold of medlars. I think I might even plant a medlar tree. Yeah.
So, I've tried to write poems before similar to your H poem, where a lot of the words start with an H. But I found I always read this poem where they get too noisy.
Uh-huh.
How do you approach this kind of a poem where you're going to be repeating words that all start with the same letter, or have certain sort of things so that you avoid that, kind of have a nice balance in the sound?
Uh-huh. Well, feedback. I'm a feedback junkie. I have a writing group of which Kim is a member, Kim Johnson, and I send poems to friends. I have one friend in Arizona, and we email each other poems, and then we have a telephone conversation about them. And she's really tough, I'm really tough. It's great. So at that stage, if I'm stuck and can't make it work, then maybe somebody else can help me through it. Does that answer? I mean, I don't have a formula that works every time. Yeah. Any other? Yes.
I just have a suggestion for him. It could be like, maybe like the words you're choosing too, because like she uses H's, and so that kind of came out as like a softer sound at first. And instead of like using like a C or like a K sound, that could come off like
Maybe.
harder.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes using more than one letter. I have a poem that I didn't read that started with the prompt to use T, L, and what was the other letter? I think maybe it was just T and L. And not to have the words start with those letters, but to have the letters be later in the poem. And that sounds pretty good. Any other questions? Yeah.
How can you tell when you're like done with the poem or like when a poem's finished?
Yeah. Paul Valéry said, you never finish a poem, you just abandon it. I find that, I send poems out to be published in magazines, and then they get rejected, usually. And then I read them again, and sometimes I'll say, oh my God, the editor was so right. This is not this is not good. This bothers me, you know, and then I'll go back to it and I'll fix something, I'll change something, or I'll just throw it out entirely. And sometimes those poems come back and I'll reread it and I'll say, the editor was a fool, you know. So it's a sense of you have to you change every second of every day. You were a different person. You change every minute. And, you know, often months go by between the time you think you've finished a poem and the time you're forced to read it again. And in that interim, you will probably be a more sophisticated reader and a wiser person, and you will read your work with new eyes, and then you will know whether it's still good or not, or whether you think it's good or not. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you have a poet or a writer that you admire a lot?
Yeah, there are some that I read in the same way that I read those old books, and they always make me want to write. Two names I'll give you. One is C.D. Wright, who died 2 years ago this month, and the other is Anne Carson, a Canadian writer who's still alive. And whatever they wrote, I would just pick up those books and I would go back to them and I would feel like something new had been taught to me, even though I'd read the book before. So their way of looking at the world and looking at language perhaps was so different from mine that it always made me want to write. And I love Paradise Lost. There are a lot of references to Milton and Paradise Lost in this book. I read Paradise Lost once a year. And that also, it's the syntax. I just love the way he writes. It opens something in me that is normally closed. Anybody else? No? Okay, well, thank you very much. You were a great audience.